Hi, welcome. I'd like to take a couple minutes to discuss, pinch collars. What do those devices, what do they represent? Are they a good idea, bad idea when it comes to dog training? And so just to describe what they basically are, they're a type of corrective collar that are interwoven together with pointy metal prongs that when you apply pressure, they will put pressure, or they'll go into the dog's neck area and assert influence onto the dog. So, how you have to look at these, and this is how I approach it through the connection, understanding ultimately the goal is to move beyond controlling a problem to fixing it. You have to look at any device you use as to whether that represents that you're changing. And oftentimes this is the case with these types of devices, is what they can represent is basically controlling a problem, or controlling the walk, for example. So you may use the pinch collar on your dog. Your dog will walk along on the walk fine within that context. But what it is, it's kind of just like pushing down or with pushing down gravel, tamping down gravel, where it hasn't turned into cement. And the cement part of it is the actual roll changing process itself. So, the goal is to move, from beyond the focal point as to devices as a crutch, or oftentimes they'll just represent just controlling the dog, to actually changing out the foundation stones and the foundation of the relationship through the role changing process, to go from you being perceived as being objectified and being perceived as a follower to actually a leader. So, when I use a device, what I use is just a normal type of a leash, a 4 or 6 foot leash, and a flat straight collar, because that's all that's needed. When you're working off connection, when you're working off the power of the mind, and you're using technique and you're using your body the right way, then because that's the focus is on the mind, it's not on devices. So, but the problem can be is if you're using a corrective collar like that, is if you're applying it and there's too much influence coming from the physical, from that connection point, at the wrong time, it can trigger aggression. And so, it's not that I don't agree with, I'd rather actually, if I'm going to use a corrective collar, I'd rather use just a choke chain type of a collar. But even, in saying that, again, I mean, when you're focused on the connection part of it, then the collars are used differently. Even when I use a corrective collar, it's not used with that type of force. Okay, people will often use too much force, or the collar will represent just control. Because ultimately the dog connects the dots to the psychology involved to this connection. So, for example, you could be walking your dog on the pinch collar, and your dog's saying, "Okay, I'm going to walk. I'm going to walk here on the collar, but I own this relationship." Okay, and the dog is still basically toll boothing or objectifying the owner, and so that's why use a pinch collar. And for the walk, but then everything else, you're going to have behavior problems all over the place, because everything branches off the decision-making process of the dog. Everything pivots off and branches off that tree. The tree's the role. So all interactions will be contaminated. But the problem is, if you don't really have a good grasp of what represents control and change, then it's going to be very problematic. You're going to have a hard time breaking out of this, and then you're going to be setting up certain type of mechanism just for control, and not be able to move to change. So the whole thing, when you look at something like a pinch collar or any device, you have to look at it from the connected to the psychology, and so the connection. I mean, because what you hold in your hand ultimately represents how you think and how you're connecting with your dog. So the device, the emphasis can come onto a device, but you have to put it into the whole package when you talk about connection and nature itself, and that's what this that's what this system's built on. It's built on stepping back and saying, okay, where are we going here? How do we get to the end result of impacting the relationship at the core level? Because that's what this system is all about. It's very unique. You're not going to, a lot of the techniques and methods I use are based on connection. Any device that's used is an extension, it's a manifestation of this connection. So, and so it's done, everything's done in a smart way. I mean, ultimately the goal is not to trigger an aggressive response, but at the same time, influence has to take hold. It's got to happen. Just like becoming the parent, establishing parental influence. So, so when you look at anything, whether it's what you're using, certain ideas even, you have to frame it in through connection. It has to come that way. So how you approach training itself, because this system is really, training is a intervention really at that level, which is all training is anyway. So anyway, just something to think about when you think about pinch collars. Step back from it and look at it, whether it's actually represents true change, or whether you just represents control, and then what is the best option to use. So anyway, thanks very much for watching.